I'm going to ask you one last question about yourself, and then I'm hoping there are going to be some wonderful questions from the audience. So, it made me laugh in the Yentop film about you, which was about your prodigious work rate. So you've written play after play after play and films, and you're churning out 3 or 4 plays a year, all of which go on to be smash hits. You're about to go to Broadway to do Ink, and you've got a musical coming up. You've written an episode of The Crown, yeah. And Alan Yentop asked you about this, and you said, yes, I'm kind of addicted to work, and then you said you'd seen a therapist to deal with your addiction to work. Yes. And then you said you'd gone into group therapy with other people who were addicted to work. And then you ruined it all by saying, and now I'm writing a play about the group therapy. Because you couldn't waste that material.
No, I mean, that's all. One part of your brain is going, God, I really do have a problem. My work-life balance is horrific. Also, this is going to make an amazing play one day, and you can compartmentalize that. But no, it would be ironic to add to my workload with a play about work addiction. But
you're going to do it.
I probably will, yeah. And I suppose also the problem is I'm aware that to be a good writer, you need to live in the world and have all the experiences and emotions and heartbreak that would mean that you can then go off and write the great play. And I'm denying myself some of that because I'm constantly chained to my computer. The problem is I just enjoy it too much. So when everyone goes, you've got a work problem, I go, yes, I know I have. I'm working on it. But I can't. Very good. I didn't think that was an accident. I can't deny the fact that I enjoy the work. It's not like I'm a city broker at 2 a.m. moving shares around and really hating it. I really, really enjoy it. So it's really hard to stop. But
okay, let's have some questions.
Obviously, a lot of the Brexit film was based on sort of all-out war and results and stuff like that. Which bits that you cut out, because obviously it was very condensed, would you have liked to put in, or what were the most painful bits to cut out?
Yeah, good question. So despite eventually alighting on Dominic Cummings forming the main character, being the protagonist and the main strand, there was an early draft that was so long, embarrassingly long, that included the Downing Street machine, David Cameron and George Osborne was a character. And it also included the aftermath of the vote, where the Conservative leadership election, which, as you say, in Tim Shipman's book, All Out War, which we sourced, we optioned for the film, and Tim became a consultant on the show, is a play and a story in itself. It's so glorious and fascinating how those 7 days where they were trying to find a leader, and it turned into a kind of farce. There was one moment when Boris had a Shakespearean rise and fall during those few days, when he couldn't finish a speech, he couldn't write a leadership speech. He'd been wanting to be Prime Minister for so long, and everyone went, well, go for it. And he couldn't think of what to say. And I just really enjoyed that. And there was this extraordinary moment in the book where they talk about this party where all the candidates are an accidental party for something else, for like a fundraising thing, where all the candidates are there, including Theresa May and Boris Johnson. They're all sort of peacocking around each other. And Andrea Leadsom said she would endorse Boris's candidacy as long as he tweeted something nice about her before midnight. And Boris was having such a good time at the party, he forgot. And he went, I forgot to tweet. And so the next day, Andrea Leadsom comes out against him and puts her name in the hat. And I realised how much of our modern day history is decided by WhatsApp. And he just, the WhatsApp group exploded. And so I really wanted to sort of capture that leadership battle, but in the end you have to realise that that's not what the play was about. I also wish I could have found more space for Michael Gove, because I find him really fascinating, and that's weird, I know, but I just think his emotional journey is quite extraordinary. The way that he felt very strongly, he was a Eurosceptic, had never denied it, and really, really, really didn't want his best friend, David Cameron, to call a referendum, because he knew he'd have to face off and oppose him. And it was a very emotional thing for him, and that is something I normally lean towards as a way of humanising politicians, but we just couldn't find the space, so I did a few silly jokes instead. But that stuff.
There's a sequel in it.
There is, but I can't be asked to write it. I'm so exhausted by it all, but yeah, it never seems to stop.
Yeah.
Now that you've moved from political history, as it were, into political current affairs, how are you coping personally with what's going on at the moment? Do you sit there thinking, I must wait 2 years, but see how it all turns out before I start looking for my characters or my insights, or are you kind of making notes every day and unable to sort of put it down?
Yeah, sort of a bit of both. Obviously, I watch like everyone else. As a citizen of this country, I watching horror as it gets more and more chaotic and unpredictable. I suppose really I try and find like what it means, and I don't know what this means yet. I don't know what's happening in the most unprecedented cycle of events we've ever known, from Parliament for the first time ever being held in contempt, to the biggest single loss by government ever, to every single week there being the first ever. It feels like it definitely warrants attention dramatically, but I suppose I don't yet know what I think it means. So one of my tactics is to go back to the original formula, which is to go back to a previous event to reflect light on it. So I'm trying to write a play about the Maastricht rebels in the 1990s. I've always had a mischievous desire to do an epic piece of theatre with John Major as the hero in it. So I'm really, if I can do to John Redwood what Lin-Manuel Miranda did to Hamilton, I'll be really thrilled. But it's so sort of take the temperature of what's happening, but try and reflect it in a historical piece, I think.
I was really fascinated by what you said about listening, the tone, the timbre, like observing people and their banter, and not writing it all down or recording it, but just listening empathetically. It sounded like. So when you go then to write, are you putting yourself in that state, or are you trying to feel that, or how do you then go from that to the writing? I mean, it's part of your process, I guess. But just curious.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. So I will take notes, and then I'll try and after the meeting, I'll try and sort of freestyle write loads of things that I felt or remembered or that I thought were important, or themes or ideas that kept come out of it. And then you. A lot of it then just becomes about structure. How are you going to structure the wealth of information that you have, and find a form and a vehicle to make that accessible? So a lot of it's just about editing and being really hard on yourself and accepting that even though your favourite bit is Boris Johnson in the cab at 1 a.m, really sad that he's lost everything he's ever wanted, you have to realise that that is not the story you're telling. So you have all this research and you start to strip it away. And the trick for that always is to focus on character. And my trick for that is the playwright who died recently, Stephen Jeffries, said you only have to ask 3 things of your character. And I think this is a helpful exercise for all of us at the moment in this age of impossible lack of empathy. You have to ask what do they want, what's stopping them from getting it, and then how do they go about getting it. And if you can answer those 3 things, you naturally have a journey by which to start attaching the research. So the obvious one is always Macbeth, which I can say because this isn't a theatre. So what does Macbeth want? Is a theatre? Oh God, no, don't. So now we have to go out and spit and, oh God. So what does Macbeth want? Interaction, audience interaction. To be king. What's stopping him from being king? He's already a king, oh no. So what does he do? Kills the king and then keeps on killing. So suddenly a journey, an arc, a structure emerges just by asking those questions. So I do that with my real life characters. I did that with Dominic Cummings. And then again, that I think is the joy and the power of drama, with no disrespect to journalism, because journalism, rightly, is relentless and it's always giving you the latest information. The joy of a story is that you get to put something in a frame and put a series of meaningless random events, but ultimately, and give it meaning by simply structuring it. And I think that's a really vital human function. We really desire and yearn for this stuff to mean something. And why this is so unsatisfying as a political moment and so exhausting is because day to day it doesn't seem to mean anything. And I think that's the power of drama.
Question there, yeah.
So I'm very interested in public history, and a lot of people don't connect with history. They don't see themselves in the past. If you talk about it as the past, then it feels much more personal. But people don't feel connected to history, and they really, as a source of history, they really don't trust television, movies, books that are historically based. Mm-hmm. Do you think that that work like yours that is unapologetically entertaining, that is not trying to say this is what history was, but saying this is a piece of it, and this is dramatized, and this is, we're not trying to be 100% what happened, but trying to tell a story. Mm-hmm. Do you think there's a place for that to be more trusted in some ways because it's being honest about not?
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, possibly. So there was an article written in some paper called The Guardian, I don't remember, by Simon Jenkins, who I really like as a writer, who again proposed a lot of what we're talking about, which is the recent spate of television and film about history, whether it's The Crown or Vice this year, or My Thing. Is that the new fake news? Is this the new threat to objective truth? And obviously, again, for the reasons I've been wanging on about, completely disagree. But I do think there is, yes, I think by creating a style and an aesthetic that is quite clearly contrived, an artifice, and I think actually the film Vice, if you haven't seen it, applies a very, very stylized form of presentation to that. Then you give yourself latitude to push that form, because an audience is aware. As soon as you start to make it feel more documentary, then your responsibilities change. But I can't deny that it's an issue. It's a problem. I bet most people in years to come, when they imagine Winston Churchill and the Queen, they'll think of The Crown and they'll picture the John Lithgow in their head. And is that a problem? Maybe it is. I don't know. I've never reconciled it.
It's a good moment to bring in John Simpson from the BBC, who spent his life in news.
Well, I wanted to ask a really dull question, actually a kind of procedural question, but Alan and I and other journalists are, of course, always having to watch out all the time for things we say might be libels.
Yes.
You're putting not only words but also actions into the characters that really exist, and often, probably quite litigious and aggressive characters. Yeah. How careful do you have to be about that? And do you have a lot of kind of legal people getting over it all and saying, well, I wouldn't say that if I knew? Or do you just say, it's art and...
It's the majority of my life, actually, speaking to lawyers who constantly, and bless them, they try to keep me free and out of jail, and I'm really grateful for them to do that. I take the moral responsibility seriously, even if it's with relatively powerful figures like Rupert Murdoch. I genuinely don't want to misrepresent their views on the world or their actions or their behaviour, as much as I will still want to challenge and interrogate them. So I think that helps. I'm not trying to stitch anybody up, and I have no alternative agenda except to understand. So I think that is helpful. But I can't believe I quite got to this point, especially around Brexit, and I still haven't been sued, and I still haven't lost my freedom. And I sort of say that quite seriously. You do have lawyers all the time. The process is that if it's with a theatre, you send in the script and they'll send it to the theatre's lawyer, or Channel 4 had lawyers all over the Brexit thing. And there's like a traffic light system they do to help me understand it. So they'll highlight green bits in the script, which are basically, that's fine, no one cares. There's an amber bit where they go, oof, are you sure, maybe? And then there's the red bits, which is basically translates as, if you say this, I cannot help you. And when you get a script like Brexit back, which is covered in red, you sort of go, that's quite exciting. Obviously something is happening here. But no, you work together as a team to try and say what version of that you can get away with and you can say. And there have been occasions when things have happened or gone out or been put on stage, and there's been some damage where you have to go and sweep up, either put your point of view across or offer to make some changes. So even with this house, there were some real-life people who wanted to express themselves to me, it's a risk analysis about whether or not you should. One of the hardest plays was Privacy, which we did, which I interviewed you for, and we placed the Snowden investigation on stage, and we kept knocking up against this problem that, for example, there's one really difficult moment. We were already previewing the show, and people were getting very nervous about it, and we were projecting some of the Snowden leak onto the back of the theatre's wall. And we discovered there was a couple of slides that you hadn't actually published in The Guardian that I think had been published in America. And so it came about, sort of 17 minutes before the show, that people were going, we think we think you're the first people to publish this information in the UK. And the security service have a few questions about that. And then you find yourself in this bizarre meeting where you're going, is projecting a slide on the back of a theatre wall, is that publishing or is it not publishing? And the point is most people don't know, so you have to take a reasonable assessment of the risk. And I don't say this to make ourselves sound heroic or cavalier, but I do sort of fundamentally believe in a free and democratic society that it's never a good look. It's not a good look to lead a playwright out of a theatre in handcuffs. And you think within that, there is a bit of safety to go, here's our responsibility. Cut to, in a couple of years' time, you'll see me being led out in handcuffs and I'll regret ever being so pompous. But I think you just have to be reasonable and test the balance. As I'm sure, to a much greater extent, you went through all of that when you originally produced the story. But it's... But what's interesting, sorry, I'm talking too much, but it's... when we took it to America, the show to America, we had all this again. And it's just very interesting that the First Amendment, generally speaking, protects journalists, and rightly so. And again, we had big conversations about whether or not playwrights have the same protection under law. And there isn't really anything to suggest that they necessarily do. It's just have we established a culture that protects playwrights to say these things. But I'm happy to be the one that keeps testing it and seeing how far we can go.
James, I know a little bit about Brexit. I've edited 4 books on it, which you probably use. Dominic Cummings, described by David Cameron as a career psychopath. Did you fall in love with it? Does it seem to you from the film that you did? And should you have fallen in love with it?
I definitely shouldn't have done. If I did, then that is a human weakness of mine. I mean, I do tend to like the people I interview, especially if they're nice to me and they give me a cup of tea and they invite me into their house and I have to protect myself against that, although not too much. I like that I start to like my characters. It's interesting. So I don't think I do fall in love with him. I mean, he has the exact opposite politics to me. And on the one hand, some newspapers suggested that I was too kind to him. Equally, other newspapers said I demonised him too much and it was a Remain stitch-up. So obviously, within that space, I'm quite thrilled because if I've done both, if I've upset both people, then I'm probably doing my job. I was impressed by him. There was discussion, as you know, in Westminster as to whether he is a genius or a fraud.
Obsessive nutter.
Those are your words. Yes, I mean he's definitely obsessive, and if you ever want to read his 10,000-word blogs on astrophysics and things, then you're welcome to. But I think he's at very least different to most strategists and policy advisors, and he thinks differently. And if there is a danger that by putting someone who behaves like that on screen, you accidentally lionize them and make them seem like geniuses and heroes. And when you've got Benedict Cumberbatch playing them, there is the risk there that he just becomes very charismatic. But I make no apologies or qualms about making my central character more sympathetic than an audience might expect, because it's the only way you can carry an audience through the information by weirdly liking somebody.
Again, probably got time for one or at the most 2 more questions, but yes.
So yeah, you did loads of research, and so obviously you care about how it really was. But like, how do you decide which artistic liberties to take, like when you're actually writing a play?
Some of it is exclusively dramaturgical. So you're faced with an immediate choice. The referendum campaign was about 3 months long. My drama can't be 3 months long. So I have to make a choice about what to include and what not to include. And that might sometimes generally include smashing 7 meetings into 1 meeting and putting people in that room who might not have always been there, but you're still capturing the essence of truth and the essence of their contribution. And then I think it's just a moment-by-moment basis. You take each issue as it comes and you ask if this is responsible. And am I stretching too far away from truth? Some of it I think is irrelevant. So did Dominic Cummings and the head of Aggregate IQ meet in Regent's Park? No, they didn't. But we had too many scenes inside and it was looking very grey and we wanted some green. And I think an audience knows that. And actually, as we know, what audiences do is as soon as they watch these dramas, like The Crown, they immediately go on Wikipedia and start seeing what's true and what's not true. And in that, I think, isn't it really exciting exchange of information? So yeah, it's a case-by-case basis. And then again, the lawyers will come in and tell you if you've gone too far and you trust them.
Yes.
Do you ever revisit the material, maybe 30, 40 years from now, when you know that all of the rhetoric that you couldn't say now, you might be able to?
Well, that's interesting. That'd be a fun exercise to go back through all my read documents and put them back on stage. Yes, I think so, and I think that one of my arguments against the why now, is it too soon-ness of things, was that this is just the start. I don't claim that this is the definitive version of Brexit. And as we've seen constantly with controversial and upsetting moments throughout history, whether it's Bloody Sunday, the Falklands War, the Second World War, things keep getting added to the canon as we learn more and more and more. So I think they should, and I think other people, including people here, should challenge my version of events and add to that. And that's the joy of it for me. So it's constantly evolving, and I hope it does. But maybe I'm sure, Brexit and its legacy is not going away, so I'm sure I'll be finding myself in this territory in 30 years' time still.
This has to be the last question, yeah.
I haven't seen any of your work, but it was interesting to see that a lot of the writing that you've done has been about dissecting an event that's already transpired.
Mm-hmm.
How much of the enjoyment that you derive from your work is actually driven by the success of it? Because it might sound really naive, but have you had that moment that you've taken a very controversial topic in the future and people have hated it, and that's the end of it? Would you still enjoy writing or dissecting what's happened?
Yes, but you're right in that one success, however you define success, makes the next one easier, and which is a huge privilege. So I because of the success of this house at the National Theatre, and lots of politicians came to see it, when the next time I wrote to them saying I'm doing a film about Brexit, they instantly said yes. When I asked the editor of The Guardian, can I come in for 2 hours and you tell me everything about how the process around publishing something like a whistleblower's leaks, I assume it's helpful to have sort of established a bit of a reputation and trust. And it's very vulnerable. And I started to wonder that during the Brexit film, with a level of cynicism and sometimes anger towards it. Before it had been broadcast, I started to think, have I undone some of that, and do I now appear to be a cynical exploiter of events for my own enjoyment, which was never the case. But that's I will not be able to predict that, and one day I will fail on an epic scale, and I probably should, because if I don't, then I'm not being dangerous enough. So, but then you can rebuild that trust and start again, if that in any way answers your question.
We have no pizza tonight, but we've got lots of drink, and I think you've earned it. So we're going to go and get you Legolas so you forget all about this in the morning, and you have no idea. But meanwhile, thank you very much for coming.
You're so welcome. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's fun.